Hi everyone, so I really wanted to film this video based on just things that I've really been reflecting over and thinking about, and today I'm going to be talking about the spiritual underpinnings of mental struggles, essentially. I'm going to be talking about part of my experiences as well. Yeah. Hold on, guys. I'm going to make something real quick. Sorry to eat on camera. I was having trouble speaking. Sometimes whenever my blood sugar drops, that can be kind of why. Like, my voice will just get really stuck in my throat and I'll just have a hard time speaking. But yeah. Today I'm going to be sharing with you kind of everything that I've been reflecting on regarding this topic. I just want to start off by saying I'm not trying to spiritualize mental health. These are just perspectives to kind of ponder over and reflect over. And I'm really just sharing my experience because I wish someone would have helped me understand in this way. And if there's anyone else on this channel or who comes across this video, I really just am making this video to help you. If anything can. The first thing I'm going to say is that I believe you can have mental health struggles that are maybe not spiritual related at all. I believe that there might be a mixture of things that happen. I believe for some people there are things that may be spiritual, and I believe for other people there may be not necessarily chemical imbalances, but there are different nutrients that we can become deficient in that can affect our mental health. So I do believe that there may be a combination of those kind of things going on. So I'm not saying all mental health is spiritual, but I just want to share the spiritual perspective again, just in case it can help anyone. So the first thing I want to say is I do believe that there is something that can happen when we accept diagnosis. So and I was talking to someone about this, and they were just kind of explaining it to me. There's this thing about coming into agreement with certain things that are spoken over us, essentially. So whether it's a diagnosis or whether it's things that you've been taught about God, or things that you may think about God after you've been through certain things in your life, what can happen is we can come into agreement with these thoughts or with these things spoken over us. And I do believe there's something that happens spiritually. The person that I was talking to kind of explained that this is how strongholds can become formed. There's different lies about God that we can come into agreement to, whether things we've been taught, whether things that we've experienced in our lives and come to think of God in this way, whether it's lies the enemy plants. I want to talk real quick about this idea of particular diagnosis. So for example, and again, these are just stories that I read about what people have experienced and just trying to understand my own life as well. But from what I have read, there's something you can do, and I believe this maybe works with like both mental diagnosis but also physical diagnosis. There's something you can do where you can ask God to break the ties of mental illness, essentially. I was reading someone's story on like CORE, I think it was, and like they've been through all this like pain, and like they were obviously hurting, and like now they were like diagnosed with depression, and they would end up crying like after they got home from their therapist appointments, and they went to this I think like a retreat with other people from their church, and they ended up just opening up about what they were going through, and this person asked God to break the ties of mental illness or break the ties of depression. And this person said that they weren't depressed anymore. And I found that really just really amazing. I will personally say, like, I believe God's will is for people to not be depressed, not be struggling with mental health. I'm going to explain things kind of from a world and societal and mental health system perspective first, so we can kind of reflect over it and compare it to what I believe God wants for us. So, but to understand this, we need to go into how the enemy works in this way and tries to really take over people's lives. So let's say that, because the enemy is always trying to turn people away from God, always trying to bring pain into people's lives. Let's say everyone that the enemy is looking to attack has a purpose on their life. Let's just say everyone in this world has a purpose on their life, okay? Theoretically speaking. So the enemy will go to like attack different people. And by that I mean pain, traumatic experiences, things like that. Okay? Now, here is the mental health system model. The mental health system model is a lot of times people have been through this pain, through this trauma, right? Well, what happens is, from a psychological perspective, the brain processes this trauma and this pain in a lot of different ways. A lot of different kind of mental health symptoms come about. And then what happens, right? They have their DSM or their diagnostic manual, and they match the symptoms up that you're experiencing with a label, with a mental health label, right? And then they put that mental health label on you and say, this is what you're dealing with. Okay. So why did I go into this? The mental health system has this model that you're never really fully going to be cured from your mental health struggle or diagnosis, that this is all your life is ever going to be, or you can learn to cope and manage it, but freedom is not really truly possible. Here's what happens. Some people, they have success with medication. Some people have success with therapy. Other people don't, and they struggle tremendously. But what happens is the people that are really struggling, really hurting, nothing is helping, is, right, let's say if the enemy is the one that tried to bring in this pain, this trauma into this person's life, right, now that even though they've been through this pain, right, that they're carrying, that was really hurtful and has really affected them, right, but it's looked at as a label, it's looked at as a mental illness. This term in particular, I really don't like. And I remember I used to look at myself in this way. But what I really don't like about this term, mental illness, is that it is looked at as like this illness, this disease that someone has with their mind, that it's just always going to be part of their life. That's who they are. That greatly bothers me. And, some people might feel differently, but I feel like mental illness is really a kind of stigmatizing word as well. It's a very confusing experience for people that go through pain or trauma, or even that have been through it, years before in their life, and it's starting to come up and everything just feels overwhelming and they're starting to show symptoms. It's a very overwhelming thing to, let's say you start off with a good life, or you're able to function, or you're able to cope, or be successful in life, and then all of a sudden you go through this painful or this traumatic experience, or multiple ones, or ones from the course of your life, and then they build up and accumulate, and now you feel like you're in a place where you're no longer functioning. You feel overwhelmed, you feel all this pain, etc. It's a very overwhelming experience, that alone, let alone reaching out for help from the mental health system. Obviously, trying your best to just feel better, to move forward with your life. And then having a label put on you, or being told that you're mentally ill, or you have this disorder, or you are given this diagnosis, or multiple ones for many people. And you feel a sense of relief, like, oh, okay, that's what's been going on. Some people feel a great sense of relief, other people feel a sense of relief, and then, there's someone driving by, it gets kind of embarrassing. But for some people, they feel a sense of relief, but they feel just like their identity has, in a sense, been stripped away, or just turned upside down, and they can feel like something is wrong with them. It's like you're no longer just the person that you've always been. Now it's like there's this label attached to the way you see yourself, essentially. Now, I talk about this because if we talk about this scenario where people's lives are really, really greatly affected, I was watching a documentary about this yesterday, which is why I'm really getting fired up about this. But if we look at that scenario, people that have not been helped by the mental health system, let's say, and they're struggling more and more. If we look at how the enemy works in people's lives, right? And the Bible says the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy, right? So we can see, the enemy will try to destroy people's lives. This is what deeply upsets me, because what I feel like one thing that is happening, at least on a spiritual level within this, is the enemy tries to wreak havoc and pain and suffering into people's lives that have a purpose on their life. And like I said, let's just say, theoretically speaking, everyone has a purpose on their life, right? But he wreaks havoc so people can never accomplish that purpose. People can be in this place of non-functioning. People can be in this place where they're struggling. They never actually end up achieving that purpose. This deeply breaks my heart, because you have people that have struggled with different mental health struggles. I don't like the word disorder. I don't like the word illness. So I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to say struggle. But you have people that are diagnosed with different mental health struggles, people that have reached out for help from the mental health system, that are suffering greatly and in so much pain, people that don't get help from medication, people that perhaps, don't get help from therapy, because not everyone knows what they're doing exactly. And because ultimately therapists are taught to follow protocol, which is what a lot of time labeling you, a lot of time for insurance purposes, but also just because that's what they were taught, and giving you medication or doing therapy, but it's under the guise of not treating you like you're a human a lot. It's under the guise of you are a label, and having to renew that sheet where they ask you all these questions. I had to do that all the time, so that's why I'm mentioning that. But this breaks my heart because you have people that have struggled most of their life and they never actually end up getting better, and they end up carrying all this pain throughout their life, and all this trauma and hurt, and have dealt with all this suffering. They never end up getting better, and they end up you know, I'm trying not to be morbid, but they end up dying, you know, never getting better, never recovering from things. That, like, deeply, deeply breaks my heart to pieces. And this is not a video against medication or therapy or anything like that. This is simply for those that have maybe dealt with similar things as I have, and wondered, you know, what's going on, or haven't received healing from the mental health system, but have maybe been harmed by them. And this is not to say that every part of the mental health system is bad or evil or corrupt, but I'm just saying that it can be very exploitative industry that tries to exploit people that are hurting, that are in pain, that are suffering, and that's what and they'll ultimately feel defenseless and helpless and terrified. That's what fires me up, and that's why I'm talking about this, and I'm going to talk about the enemy's role in this. So these are real things. These are like real instances where people that have had a purpose on their life never actually end up fulfilling it because the enemy tries to destroy. Because the enemy tries to keep people from ever fulfilling that purpose. Speaking from personal experience, I've mentioned, like, I had a therapist tell me one time that I would probably always deal with depression, that I would probably have to take medication my whole life, and you know, that's all my life would ever be. Now, at the time, I was hearing voices telling me to hurt myself and kill myself and insulting me. I felt very suicidal at the time. I was just absolutely miserable, and hearing that, like, just shattered my hopes that I would feel like that my whole life. You know, I remember just thinking, I can barely get through this second, let alone, like, my life's never gonna be the same, all because I went through something traumatic that seemed to turn my life upside down, and I no longer seem to be the same, and my life no longer seems to be the same, you know. I didn't know what to think, but I mean, it just was very, very, very disheartening. And I'm telling you, that's how the mental health system can look at things. Or even if you are in remission, well, full healing isn't really truly possible. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story because I had that spoken over me. And I was completely broken to people around me if people would look at me in the state I was in, you know. I'm going to hurry up and get into this because it looks like I'm running out of space. Maybe I can delete something though. So, like I said, someone had spoken that over me. I didn't know what to think. I also will say I had a bipolar disorder label put on me. And this is just to say, like, how severe things were. A lot of people will consider bipolar disorder as like a pretty severe mental struggle. But I had that label put on me. Okay. So I didn't just have like a depression label put on me, you know. I feel like the outcomes with depression clinically are a lot more positive than for someone to be told they're dealing with bipolar disorder. I first just want to say a lot of people are misdiagnosed. Particularly, I just found out through YouTube comment, women are more likely to be diagnosed with that, particularly. And I was going through a really hard time in my life where all these memories of things that I had been through were coming up. I was also working at a job that was kind of honestly doing some just sketchy things at the time, and I'm sure I did not know how to cope on top of everything I was dealing with. I'm trying to think. For example, I had a male manager, and he would take me to like all the catering events. Probably the first or second week I'd started working there, they said I was going to drive the catering truck, and I thought it was like a joke. And I hadn't been driving that much, but I didn't have a CDL to drive a truck, let alone with an attachment, like a trailer hanging off of it. But one guy, and this is a grown man, that was going had a DUI, so he couldn't drive, and then my male manager was going to be driving his car, and I didn't know how to speak up for myself. I didn't know what was going on. I was 19. I had just started working at this place. I was already dealing with a lot mentally, and I ended up driving the catering truck. Very weird dynamic. Like, it was just two grown men taking me to help cater this wedding. No one else. Then they ended up taking me to a bar underage, and they ended up drinking, and I didn't end up drinking, but I ended up driving the guy with the DUI home in the truck in the dark. But it was a very weird experience. I don't really know how to feel about it, but there were also all these memories from my life coming up on top of just the sketchiness of the situation. It was very scary to go through that and feel like they could like do anything to me at any moment, and like all I could do if something happened was like try to jump out of the truck or something, you know. It was very overwhelming, but I share this because that's when my symptoms were like the worst, or that's when I was struggling the most. And I share this because here, you know, I could literally tell a therapist, like, oh, hey, this is what I'm going through, or like, this is what I've been through. But I'm telling you, you know, they don't fully validate your trauma in a way where it's like, oh, okay, that's why you're dealing with these symptoms. You know, they may partially do that, but it's like, no, even if I were to explain that's what was going on with me at the time, they would still be like, oh, well, you still have this label on you. You're still dealing with this, rather than really looking at what I was going through at the time. And I encourage you, because I feel like people don't necessarily always teach you to do this, especially from a therapeutic level. But I encourage you, if you are having really, really a hard time with your mental health, I encourage you, because I know a lot of people can gaslight in the midst of things and make you feel like you're wrong and you should just be taking what you're going through. But I encourage you, if you are really, really struggling and you are you're going through anything sketchy or any kind of abuse whatsoever, whether it's verbal, whether it's emotional, if you're in an environment that just makes you feel really cruddy in any capacity, if you're working a job that is toxic, etc., I encourage you, pay attention to what environments you are in, the people you are around, what is happening in your life and see if there's some sort of correlation, because if you're like me, you'll deal with a lot of gaslighting or having these labels put on you rather than someone really looking into things and being like, what are you going through right now? Why are things so severe? I encourage you to do that. Another thing that was really hugely helpful for me, a lot of time when you're struggling mentally, you feel like you don't have hardly control over anything. One thing that was very, very empowering was to take inventory of my life and to see if there was anything in my life that ultimately was hurting me, and to give yourself permission to let go of any of the things hurting you. And I'm talking about if there are any relationships affecting you, etc. I'm telling you, your mental health and you feeling good is so much more important, especially if you've struggled with like suicidal thoughts, because people will gaslight you and make you feel like you should just be able to handle it or whatever the case may be. But I'm telling you that you matter, your feelings are important. And I encourage you to take an inventory of your life if you're struggling, and see if there's anything in your environment that is affecting you, that is hurting you, and give yourself permission to let go of whatever that may be, even if it's an idea, even if it's a thought, even if it's like, oh, I've always wanted to do this my whole life, but I don't have support from anyone when it comes to this. I'm telling you, anything that is hurting you, take an inventory. Sometimes when we are struggling, when we are in pain, when we are struggling mentally, there can be a lot of things that are hurting us, that are leading to that pain and accumulating that pain. And we may not think it will make a difference because it's our mind, it's our mental health, but some of those things can make a huge difference. If you think about when you were in those points of mental health crisis, like when I look back at my life and I think about when I was struggling with suicidal thoughts, or I was hurting and just really, really having a hard time just functioning, you can almost think of it in this way of, we have all this pain that has accumulated throughout our lives. It's almost as if in those moments of crisis, whether it's suicidal thoughts, right? Because we're told when someone is dealing with that or feeling like that their pain has outnumbered their coping resources or ability. But when we are in those places in our life and when we're in a lot of mental pain and anguish, it is almost as if our mind is crying or screaming out in pain because all this pain throughout our life has accumulated. And it feels overwhelming, and it feels like so much more than we know how to handle. Okay. All right. I kind of went on a ramble, a really long ramble, but I want to get back into the spiritual perspective of this. And simply just share from personal experience. So for me, it was really important to believe not only that I could get through what I was going through, but that in time would I come to understand that my life wasn't always going to be like this, even though I struggled with things for years. Now, let's say theoretically the enemy tries to bring a lot of pain and destruction into someone's life. Okay? And let's say his plan is to bring so much into this person's life to just practically destroy them and to turn them away from God. So now they're hurting, now they're in all this pain, right? Let's say they're hurting in a way where it's like beyond what they can fix, beyond how the mental health system has been able to help them. This person, let's say their only hope is God, right? Okay, so what happens? They come to God, they understand His love, He's ministering to them, they're spending time in His presence, they're finding themselves in tears because God is ministering to them and reaching those deepest wounds in them. And let's say this person keeps coming to God and coming into His presence and understanding His love more and more for them. And their mind is being renewed in His truth. And let's say through His power, right, this person reaches a point where they are healed, where the loneliness and the suicidal thoughts and the anxiety that they used to carry and the depression is healed. Not that they didn't work on other things as well, but what really healed was God and His love, the power of His love, right? Now let's say this person, they had a purpose on their life, right? So the enemy wanted to try to destroy them so they couldn't fulfill that purpose. This is really clever of the enemy because what he can do is try to make you feel like this is all your life is ever going to be. You're never going to get out of this. For example, with the bipolar label, I couldn't see it when it was happening, right? Especially because here's the thing, when we see therapists or psychologists or doctors, we look at them as experts. Here's the thing, though, that is kind of somewhat infuriating is the doctors, the therapists, the psychologists, a lot of them don't have any kind of spiritual world view. So it's all psychological, it's all mental, it's all emotional, essentially. There's no room for spiritual. Or maybe if there's room for spiritual, it's like New Age spiritual beliefs, but not the actual truth of what can sometimes be happening spiritually. So, for example, I had a bipolar label put on me, and I never, actually accepted it. I had a lot of people with conflicting views that would say, oh, I don't think you are, or I would get reactive when people were yelling at me, but because that label was put on me, I didn't see it as, oh, I'm just having a normal reaction, or I'm in fight or flight, so I'm reacting. Instead, it became well, that label was put on me and people are gaslighting me and people are saying there's something wrong with me when I'm simply reacting and in pain from the abuse that I've gone through. But this is why I get so upset when labels are put on you and then you have a bunch of people gaslighting. And why I have to speak out on this, because I don't know if anyone else has been through this. It's hard enough dealing with gaslighting, but then to have labels put on you by a therapist or a counselor, and then for people to use those very labels against you to justify their abuse can get confusing. So the enemy wanted me to take this label. He wanted me to feel like I would never get out of what I was going through. Frankly, I don't think he wanted me to be alive, and yes, the enemy will attack that hard. Like I said, the Bible says he comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And the enemy will start attacking even when you're young. So if there's a purpose on your life, and the enemy knows that and he sees that, and he's pretty aware of what that looks like, or who does and who seeks to follow Jesus. He's pretty aware spiritually, but he'll start doing things from a young age. He'll work in a number of ways to try to thwart and derail that purpose that God has placed on your life. here's where it can get kind of confusing. And I share this just in case anyone else has been through this or is going through this, and I wish someone would have taught me this. I'm glad I know now. It's been a journey, but here's where things get confusing. Because you have a label put on you, right? You want the enemy, or the enemy wants you to accept it and feel like you're never going to do anything with your life. Now, for me particularly, the label of bipolar disorder, because one of the symptoms is grandiosity, I would have times where I'd be worshiping God. I'd be like, God, you can do anything. Like, all things are possible through you. I can do anything through you, Here's the thing, I've always been a big dreamer. Ever since I was young, I've always been a very ideal-oriented person, a very imaginative person. That is how I've always been. And it's something that I realize it never goes away, Here's the thing, though, when you have big ideas, especially think you can do things when it's like you're struggling with different things in your life, and people will look at you as like, who are you to think you can do this, Here's the thing, if you think in that way, for example, when you have that label put on you, you can start feeling like, I'm being grandiose to think that I can do these things, or that God would maybe want to do these things through me, or I'm crazy, or this is too big. Then to have that label come up, and then to have someone drill in your head that you're probably always going to deal with this your whole life, this struggle, and you're not really going to have that much of a life, because you're literally made to feel like if you have a diagnosis put on you, that you can't have, like, for example, if you have big aspirations, you're made to feel like you can't actually ever really truly go after them. You have limitations put on you and on your life, and this deeply upset me because, I had different aspirations and things that I wanted to go after and fulfill. Most of them when I was like going through that time. But the enemy's really clever in that, he will use counselors and doctors and people to speak over you and to you. He will. But he's very clever in that, here was his agenda. If he could make me feel like I was crazy, or what I wanted to do was too big, or that's something I'm never going to be able to do, or he could make me doubt or second guess myself so much, or he could get me to see myself through the lens of this label, then would I ever really truly believe that I could do those things that I really wanted to do, that I really wanted to accomplish in this life? It would definitely be hard, and I can tell you for a long time, when it came to those things, like, I felt crazy. It made me feel crazy because I had that label put on me. And because, here's the thing, this is why I go into this, because sometimes that is the very enemy's agenda. Yes, I do believe, again, there can be mental components of this in terms of not everything is spiritual. Not everyone that goes through this is spiritual. But there are some people that when they go through this, it is something spiritual because there's a purpose on your life. And the enemy's trying to derail that purpose. Before you can even discover what that is, before you can even open your eyes and see who you really are. And I'm telling you, like I said, he's done that a number of ways. Like, he'll knock down your self-esteem. But particularly, through that mental health system, that was a huge way he tried to derail me. And here's the thing. Like I mentioned in another video, I tried to go see a counselor not super long ago, and I had mentioned what I had been through, and automatically, because I had heard voices in my life, my experiences were invalid and my perceptions were invalid automatically. And it's no wonder, like, I would have such a hard time speaking. And again, do you think that's a coincidence? No. Because, I would talk about what God had healed in my life and what God had done. And this person was trying to plant doubt that God hadn't really healed that. And again, yeah, it's the enemy going through that, or that's the enemy doing that, similar to how he gets Adam and Eve to question what God had said, Did God really say you can't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Did God really heal you? Are you sure God really healed you, even though you've seen it, you just know it? When you know, and your life is completely different, and you're not crying all the time, and you don't feel depressed all the time, and the suicidal thoughts after 10 years are gone, and the thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself are gone, like all of it. But this is why I get so upset, because people in the mental health system will start just trying to make you doubt your perceptions. When you're a human and your perceptions are valid, regardless of what you've been through, regardless of what you say. And that's something that deeply bothers me about how it works. But make no mistake, that's a way that the enemy can try to work to try to push your voice out, to try to silence you. I didn't understand for a long time, and I felt like I was just constantly fighting with my mind, and I felt like I never could seem to get out of that place where not only could I let go of that label, but I could just trust my own perceptions. And I didn't understand why it was so hard. And it's like, yeah, I was literally fighting against my own mind. My mind was just being twisted, probably by the enemy. Now, when we go into this, why else is this really huge to understand, right? Because real quick, I will just say, just to kind of clarify what I said. Let's say someone has a purpose on their life, right? Maybe they can't see it because they've been torn down so much of their life. Maybe they don't believe it. We also live in a society, in a world that they don't think in that way. If you don't want to do something in your life that is related to a 9-to-5 or to conform to kind of the societal pattern of life where it's like you pick a major and then you have a career and a job, it's like you're a very highly creative person and you want to use those abilities God has created within you and go that path that He's leading you to. Not only can it be terrifying, but it's like it goes, completely catty corner to what is considered the norm of society. But then to throw that on top of it, you have a label put on you, and now you feel even more crazy. Now you feel even more afraid. Now you feel like, oh, like I'm being grandiose, or you start second guessing yourself or doubting yourself tremendously. But let's say a person has a purpose on their life, right? But now the enemy is trying to, they've put all this pain in, he's put all this pain in your life and this suffering. And he's trying to make you feel like this is the truth. You're never going to get out of this. This is all your life's ever going to be. He's used counselors to speak over you. But let's say this person has a purpose on their life and the enemy knows. That's why he's fighting so hard. And wants to get this person to see through that lens that they're being told is the truth. So they don't see that the enemy is behind it, that they don't see that there's a purpose to their life, and that's what the enemy is after. to make them think that they have to carry this label the rest of their life, to see themselves through this lens, that they're always going to be in this pain, that that's all their life is ever going to be. And how do we get into the spiritual part of this even more? There are certain people that have different spiritual abilities that they are seen by the mental health system as everything from schizophrenic to bipolar. There are people that can see certain things spiritually, but it's not right to talk about that, because if someone does, by this system, people are labeled, people are looked at as abnormal, people are looked at as if they have a disorder, when there are people that can see things spiritually. I was reading someone's story. I can't remember the website, but it talks a lot about people's stories that had been in the mental health system, come out of it, discussing the harms. And this person was talking about, that they saw demons and they saw angels, and they didn't understand what was so wrong with that. And I remember reading this person's words, and I remember, even though I couldn't relate to their experiences, I remember just reading that. And I remember I just was like, this person is extremely articulate. There's nothing wrong with them mentally. Like, I can just tell that, they say they've had all these labels put on them, but there's nothing wrong with them, And I remember just reading that, and I remember just thinking, yeah, what is wrong with that? What is wrong if people see that? Well, little did I know later that, like I said, there are people that have been given the ability to see in the spirit. I believe it varies for different people, but I was talking to a friend because I would have images kind of start coming up in my mind, and I had heard about seeing in the spirit. And regarding the gaslighting experiences people had been through, I really, really deeply related to that. She told me that I was able to see in the spirit, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, because a lot of this is relatively new. I do think, like, there were things that I was able to see when I was younger, but I can't hugely remember a ton of my childhood, or at least my spiritual experiences. But okay, almost everyone has left, so it's not super awkward. But she was just explaining that to me, and I simply just had like an image come up in my mind. Here's what makes me upset is there are so many people that have these abilities that they are gaslit. Why? Because it's the enemy, and it's the enemy trying to work through people. I went through a period of time where I just started seeing how the enemy had not only worked in my life, it's like the puzzle in my life was just revealed, and I was able to see exactly everything the enemy had tried to do throughout my life to keep me from reaching this point. But it's like, not only was I able to see what he had tried to do in my life, it's like I was able to now see how he had worked in my family's life, how he had worked at my friends' lives, how he had tried to work in even a church I was going to, like everything he was doing. And all this stuff just started coming up one day, all these like just thoughts essentially, and that's a lot of how the videos all about spiritual warfare came up on my channel, as I just had to start seeing that and start understanding how he worked. But what I didn't understand is, I had been through so much gaslighting because the enemy didn't want me to be able to trust my own perceptions, because if I started trusting my own perceptions, then I would start seeing how he had worked in my life. And I would start trusting what I was perceiving, even on a spiritual level. And he didn't want me to see how he had been working in my life and figuring that out. So he used a lot of people in my life to gaslight me, and this is what he does. He uses a lot of people in your life to gaslight you. If you are trying to fulfill a purpose for God, or even if you're not, or you have certain spiritual abilities from God, this is what he does. Because because there are some people that can see like spirits and like where they're working in a place, and no, this isn't like that far-fetched. I mean, even in the Bible, like, people could discern spirits. There were all sorts of spiritual experiences that people were having, but there are some people that can see where spirits are working in a place and see them. And what the enemy will try to do is he'll try to gaslight this person so much, or have other people gaslight them. And for some people, they end up being put into a psych ward. And I think it's really important to talk about this, because it's really heartbreaking. But this is what the enemy wants, because of that person that sees these things spiritually, dares, speaks up about it, and then he starts exposing the enemy. And there are many variations of this. People that are prophetic, etc. But this is something like very, very common. And instead of the mental health system being open to spiritual views, instead the person has a label put on them. They're, in a sense, taught to deny or doubt their own spiritual abilities. Right? Because if you say, like, oh, like, I'm seeing spirits, or I'm seeing this, if you say that to a mental health person, they're going to try to label you, maybe give you medication, maybe an antipsychotic, so you'll stop seeing those things. And the enemy gets to have his way, or try to have his way, with people. See, the biblical worldview, we see it talks about spirits, we see it talks about spirits working through people, even it talks about, a spirit came upon Saul. The biblical worldview, it's normal, and it's the truth, but not to the American worldview, not to the societal view. If you believe in the biblical worldview, or you don't fit within that norm of, being able to see certain things that other people don't, you're looked at as crazy, or you have a label put on you, or you're given medication, or you feel like you have to be quiet about it, because how overwhelming and how traumatic is it to be treated like that, and to be given a medication that maybe you don't even need, or to be put into a psych ward when you're maybe seeing what the enemy is doing, or you're able to see in the spirit. Now, I can't necessarily see demons or anything like that, but some people can, and I don't look at that as crazy. I believe it's just something that people can see, different people can see. But I want to highlight that the biblical worldview and what we believe and seeing the spiritual behind it is wrong in society's eyes. It's wrong in the world's eyes. Believing in healing, all this stuff. You're looked at as there's something wrong with you. That's how our world, that's how our society looks at us as Christians. Or if you say that you see certain things. And understand this is a huge agenda that the enemy does, where he tries to get the people that are prophetic, he tries to get the people that can see in the spirit, see different things. He tries to get them in a psych ward. He tries to get counselors and therapists to put labels on them and to give them medication, to try to change something about them that is spiritual, simply so the enemy can't be exposed. And he does all this to derail people from fulfilling those purposes that God has placed on their life. And yes, he is this evil. He is this, he plots in this way. The enemy does. He really does go to these lengths where you will feel like you're struggling, or you feel like no one is hearing you, or you will feel like you're being gaslit repeatedly. And I'm telling you, he will do these things. Because if he sees that gift, or he sees that ability, or he sees that, because he can sense things. That you can sense things or see things. He's going to try to push your voice down. He's going to try to silence you. He's going to try to derail you and destroy you. And this isn't from a fear place. This is from an awareness place of how he works. Okay? Because we know God holds the victory and nothing can stand against him. But it's just wild to me that I went so much of my life dealing with gaslighting and being treated this way by the mental health system. And seeing people that are treated this way as well and put into a psych ward or gaslit repeatedly, or their experiences or perceptions are invalid, when really what they see is probably way closer to the truth than these mental health perspectives. I believe when we do see things going on a spiritual level, we see what more is really going on behind things. But the enemy will use even people in the mental health system to fulfill his purposes, to try to throw people into confusion, to try to make people feel like their perceptions are invalid. And again, it's all to derail that purpose on your life. So I hope this video can answer questions and help anyone. I feel like it's just a rambling of different thoughts. But for quite a while, especially how wild it is to me that people are being put into a psych ward, people are being treated like this, that have these spiritual abilities, that aren't crazy, that aren't schizophrenic or bipolar that can simply see in the spirit or have different spiritual abilities that are being treated like this and being oppressed like this. And it makes me very, very angry, honestly, truly. And yeah, it's wild to me because the mental health professionals and counselors and therapists don't realize this and instead see other people as crazy when people are being put in these positions. People are being treated horribly. People are being exploited. That have these abilities. There's nothing wrong with them. And it's wild to me. It's wild to me how the mental health system is set up, but it doesn't surprise me that much. But because Satan's the prince of the power of the air, and these industries can be very exploitative for money. And the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. It doesn't shock me that this is happening, but it is wild to me how there are people that are being oppressed in these ways that have nothing wrong with them. But these counselors, these therapists, these psychologists insist that this is what's going on and how the enemy has tried to have his hand in this system. Okay. Feel free to share your thoughts down below. I hope this video can help anyone, particularly that has felt like what they have been dealing with mentally has been spiritual. I hope it can explain what's happening on a deeper level, both talking about my experiences, but also what's happening in the mental health system. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you.